Who is art made for? It sounds like a simple, straightforward question, but it's an incredibly important one. Many people feel excluded from the art world, feel like it doesn't concern them, or they feel like they're simply out of the loop. These feelings are completely valid. Often, to understand an artwork, we need to understand its symbols, its context, and very often, art history. Art has this tendency to be very self-referential, which tends to exclude the uninitiated. There's a lot of people trying to make the art world more accessible, taking it out of museums and bringing it directly to you or on your screens, like this video. However, YouTubers aren't the only ones who can do that. A small handful of revolutionary artists throughout history have done exactly that, bridging the gap between the art world and the general public, challenging industry norms and engaging new audiences. Artists like Serge Lemoyne. He was an activist, he was subversive, and above all, he was a rebel, fighting the elitist tendencies of the art world, and this rebelliousness could already be noticed at the Montreal School of Fine Arts where he studied and was eventually kicked out of. A quick example of this rebelliousness could be seen in the house he started painting. This is an example of him taking art outside of museums. However, the city of Actonville didn't really like what they considered an eyesore made by a troublemaker, so they ordered his house to either be restored or demolished, calling it a public danger. Lemoyne brought them to court, twice, arguing that his house was a work of art in progress. He won, twice. Sadly, the house was the victim of arson in 2000. But Lemoyne's truly game-changing work would come in the 70s with his most famous series, his blue, white, and red period. Between 1956 and 1979, the Montreal Canadiens won 15 out of 23 Stanley Cups. They were dominating the world of hockey. Needless to say, hockey, already very important in Canada, was even more so in Montreal as its team put the newly effervescent Quebec culture on the map. In 1967, Montreal hosted the World's Fair, and in 1976, it also hosted the Summer Olympics. In those years, Quebec culture wasn't only thriving, but was also recognized. It isn't quite true that Quebec art resonated with all of Quebec society. Even though the Quebec artist Jean-Paul Riopelle had international fame in the 1950s and onwards, it doesn't necessarily mean that his artworks were understood and appreciated by the people of Quebec. Lemoyne, though he admired Riopelle, had this sensitivity, the idea that his art should appeal to a broader public, that culture belongs to everyone and not just an elite. His most famous artwork is Dryden, made in 1975. In the 70s alone, Ken Dryden had won 5 Stanley Cups with the Canadiens as their goaltender. He was an icon, and what helped him stand out as an icon is his classic mask painted as a target with the colors of the Canadiens. Dryden, the painting, is painted in the style of an abstract painting, but it's not abstract at all. It represents a living man and depicts an icon which only hockey fans will recognize. Same goes for number 10, La Fleur. It looks like an abstract painting if you're not aware of what the colors and what that number means for hockey fans. Throughout this series, Lemoyne, as a hockey fan and an artist, was able to make art which, instead of being inaccessible to the masses, became inaccessible to those who aren't interested in hockey and sports. Very often, the people in the art world aren't interested in sports. I'm a prime example of that. However, despite that, Lemoyne's work stands out, not because they look cool, which they do, nor because they represent hockey references, but they stand out because they recognize hockey as part of Quebec and Canadian culture. He's making works about an element of our culture which, even though it often doesn't appeal to an elite, reaches and binds thousands of people together. So to answer the question, who is art made for? Very often it's made for the elite, for those who have the money to buy art, for those who have the knowledge to recognize certain codes and symbols. But sometimes Art is made for a large public by using codes and symbols which don't need to be explained, that are already acquired and understood through the experience of popular culture. You don't need to open a book, watch documentaries, or take university classes to understand this type of art, because it echoes directly with experiences shared by a large swath of the population. I love Lemoyne's Blue, White, Red series for that. I think there's a lesson to be learned from his work, from his effort to democratize art and make it accessible to everyone. Because I believe art should be made for everyone. And Serge Lemoyne shows us that it's possible to both make art that will appeal to people and make art that is relevant, evocative, and visually striking.